Hi, I'm Alison from Bag Lady Bird Learn to Sew. Welcome. Today I am going to be showing you my method for gathering. So gathering is one of those Marmite tasks within sewing. You either love it or you hate it, and there are so many patterns out there at the minute that include some gathering. So if you want to make the latest patterns, the latest trends, then you need to really know how to do your gathering and how to get good, even results without your thread snapping. So I'm going to show you my method now. Okay, so I just want to show you the sewing machine settings I have got here. The needle position is on 5, that means the needle is central on this machine. My stitch I have got on a normal straight stitch, stitch A, and I'm going to put my stitch length to 4, which is the longest stitch length on this machine. The tension dial is just left as standard on the 4 setting. So I've got 2 pieces of calico here. This longer piece is the piece that I will be gathering. I have marked this with a marker at the centre, and this is the piece that I'll be gathering it to. Again, I've marked it with a marker for the centre. You would do that either with a pin, a notch, a tailor's tack, whatever method you prefer to mark, or a friction pen, you can mark your centre point here. So I've got a different colour thread. I've got a yellow on the bottom and a blue on the top, just to make it easy to see what we're doing. What you want to do is 1 row of stitching inside the seam allowance and 1 row of stitching outside the seam allowance, so that when you sew down your seam allowance to attach this to the other part, that you will be stitching between the 2 rows of stitching. So what we're going to do first of all is, starting close to the edge, no back tacking, is we're just going to sew down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So just keep your thread tails long at the back. So we're just sewing straight down until we get to our middle marker. We're going to put the needle down, we're going to lift the presser foot and pivot, then 2 stitches that direction, lift the presser foot and pivot, and we're going to come back and sew this in the opposite direction. So I'm now keeping the edge of my foot level with this first row of stitching. And we're just coming down, keeping your thread tails out of the way until you get to the edge of the fabric again. So this time we're going to do it on the opposite side of the fabric. So this is one of the only times I sew with the majority of the fabric to the right hand side. So just sewing along with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Come down to the centre marker, needle down, pivot, presser foot down, 2 stitches, needle down, pivot, and spin your fabric around, press the foot back down, and you're coming down the second row of stitching. So we're keeping the edge of the presser foot level with that first row of stitching. And sewing to the edge. Okay, so this dark blue thread is the top thread, and the orange thread is the underneath thread from the bobbin, and it's the underneath threads that are much easier to pull. So you want to get your underneath threads and pull those to pull the fabric in. You can do this gradually, a little bit at a time, just gently pulling or pushing your fabric along the threads. So because you have anchored them at the centre with that little turnaround, it means that you're not going to pull your threads out, you're not fighting against anything, and you're always going to have the centre to match up. So we can pull these in to match the same as the section that we're sewing it to. So just a little bit more. And then you can even out these gathers so that they are nice and even. You don't want more gathers like in that section. You want to spread those out like so, keeping this together. Once you've got your distance, you can knot all your threads together so that it stays the correct length. You don't want it to get bigger. And then you can do the same for the other side. So we will gently pull the threads, so orange bobbin threads, and pull those so you need to pull both of, so we've got both of the orange there, pulling those, and again you're just pushing the fabric towards, along the threads towards the centre, and getting so this centre to the edge matches up. Once you've got that matched, just knot it to secure it. It doesn't have to be perfect knot, it's just you don't want to lose all the gathers that you've created. There we go, so we'll spread them out so we're nice and even once you've got that lined up. So you don't really want any gathers in your seam allowance, but you want them to come up to your seam allowance. So a seam allowance on here, we're imagining for this garment is 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimetres. So our seam will be stitched between these. So now I'm going to put this right sides together. I'm going to keep the gathers on the top side, so matching up the centre point where we got the markers. Going to pin our edges here. You can pin sort of on your seam allowance to get that right, and then just adjust the gathers as required, like so. For a piece of this length, just another couple of pins is sufficient, and the same on your other side. So this means that each side of the centre has got exactly the same amount of fabric in there. You haven't got more on one side than the other, so that then makes it much easier to get the gathers even across the full spread. Gathers on calico is not the easiest fabrics to gather because it's stiff, so it doesn't give you lovely soft gathers like some other fabrics might, but it still does gather significantly. Stitch length wants to go back to your regular stitch length of 2.5, and we're stitching this between the two gather rows with a 5/8 seam allowance. So I'll put my needle down, remove the pin, remove this next pin, and a few stitches in reverse, secure this seam, and you would go back to the correct thread for your project. So you could be using cream if this was your finished garment. You can see here that I'm stitching between the two rows of gathers. You can use your hands to manually even out any gathers as you sew as well. We come over the centre point now. So we're on the final straight. we go, a few stitches in reverse to secure it. Don't sew over your pins like I've just done. So once you've sewn this, you can check your gathers from the right side, and what you should get is lovely, neat, even gathers. There's another pin that's got left in. Neat, even gathers on the gathered side of the fabric and flat on the top side of the fabric. So now, all you need to do is remove your gathering stitches. So we can just break these here, or even on the other side. Break your orange because that's going to pull out much more easily. And then you should just be able to remove. You can remove the gathered stitches. If you can remove the gathered stitches, then the stitches, your top layer, will come off just so easily. And then the same on the reverse side. You should be able to pull your orange threads, and this is why it's much easier to use a different contrasting colour thread on the top and the bottom, and contrasting to your fabric as well. Just when you're trying to remove these stitches, means you know which ones are the easy ones that are going to pull. Get rid of all your threads. So there we go. Nice, even gathers, no breakages for whatever garment you are making. So happy gathering. Remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more great Learn to Sew videos that will help make you a better dressmaker.